So picking up where we left off, we're going to ensure that when we modify the splines that are incoming, we no longer kind of additively keep on adding to the landscape. We're actually going to make sure that we overwrite any changes that we make. And that's going to allow us to work with the tool in a kind of more intuitive way. So first of all, we're going to go inside of our tool once more. And actually, before we even do that, before we even open up the tool, so you just load it up there, we're going to go back to the landscape editing mode. And remember, if you do end up in a tricky situation with loads of splines on your terrain, you can just go inside of the landscape editing mode, go to your manage tab, click on splines, select all the control points, and then just hit delete on the keyboard. So now we're back to a fresh slate. Okay, so I'm going to then exit out of the landscape editing mode with Shift 1 on the keyboard there, and we're going to open up the tool. So just a quick run through of where we're at. We set up the script, and we add the parameters from the property set. Then we're going to bind the event, so that is the buttons on the property set. When we press them, we're going to recook. But we're not going to recook until after we've instantiated a Houdini session and then instantiated a digital asset. So previously, the way we set it up was over here. At the end of the script shutdown, we would delete the instantiated asset, and we also had enabled auto bake. So with the Houdini engine inside of Unreal, specifically with relation to splines, although it does hold true with other apps too, when we bake the actor, that means that we disconnect the thing that's been created from the digital asset. So we're sort of going to abuse the fact that the splines that are created by Houdini are somehow connected to the asset. It sort of retains a memory on the digital actor of the splines it's created. So we're not going to auto bake it. We're actually going to leave the digital actor, the digital asset in the scene as a persistent object between sessions. Okay, so we're not going to delete it. We're also, to that end, we're not going to delete the instantiated asset at this point. So that means when we run the script right now, we're going to, every time we run it, we're going to create a new digital asset, and then we're going to cook that one. So we're never kind of cleaning up after ourselves, which could be problematic. But I'll try to sort of go through step by step and show you sort of how we handle the cleanup in this kind of new paradigm. So we don't want to bake the output, and actually we want to preserve the output. What we want to do is we want to abuse the fact that this digital asset, after it's been created, has a memory of the spline that's connected to. So we're actually just going to move the delete instantiated assets to the start of the recook process. So it's weird, we want to recook it, so why are we deleting it? Well, when we delete the digital asset, the Houdini actor, it's actually going to destroy all the splines that were created along with it. Okay, so this is sort of like a refresh, or yeah, sort of like clean up existing splines. Okay, oops. So I'm just gonna go and do this. So that's the first thing we're gonna do. Of course, now you might be correct in wondering, how do we cook a digital asset that's been deleted? Well, we can't. So we actually have to re-instantiate the digital asset. So we're going to disconnect it here. We're not going to instantiate it on the startup of the script anymore. What we're going to do is we're going to create an instantiate event, and we're going to wire that in here. And then just like we did before with the delay until next tick up here, I'm going to put down a delay until next tick. So after the delete has happened, we're going to delay. Then we're going to call instantiate. There we go. That is, I'm not sure that's actually the right one. So we're going to rename this to instantiate HDA. There we go. Let's see if we can find the right one now. There it is. Okay, it was the correct one. So we're going to wait a frame after deleting to reinstantiate it. Then we're going to wait another frame until we try to run the cook process. Actually, is this right? No. This isn't the right thing we want to do. And you may remember that we touched on it earlier. If we try to cook the asset or modify parameters on it before the digital asset is finished instantiating, we're going to just get a failure. So if you remember, we have this post instantiation event, and that is when we want to do the cook. So recook is now going to call, delete the previous asset. It's going to instantiate a new one, and we're going to move up the cooking behavior and the setting of parameters to the post instantiation delegate there. Okay. All right. A little bit technical, but hopefully you're following. And just remember, you can go through this at your own pace and rewatch the video if this is a little bit unfamiliar. So okay, now so I can even keep track, because I'm kind of losing myself here. We're adding the property set. We're saying when we press the cook button, We're going to delete any existing instantiated assets. So it's important. It might be a good idea to have a little check here. So we're going to say is valid. Okay. So we're going to say if there is an existing instantiated asset, then we're going to delete it. If not, then we're just going to go straight into the instantiation step. Okay. Just pressing R here to do the little reroutes to keep things a bit more organized. Okay, not very important, but this is the way I like to work. So we're checking if there is a digital asset, we're going to delete it. And if not, we're not going to delete it. But in either case, we're going to instantiate it. Okay, so then this is the instantiation. So we instantiate the asset and we're going to set the wrapper. Then after it's finished instantiating, we're going to set the parameters and we're going to do the cook. Okay, so now let's check this out, see how this works. I press Shift-9 to launch the tool. To open the scriptable tools mode. I'm going to click on the splines tool, and then I'm going to go and make sure I select my landscape spline. It's getting a little bit annoying, constantly having to hook that up. So we'll deal with that in a second too. And I'm going to go ahead and hit recook. Okay, so same as before, we see our spline on the terrain. Nothing so far has changed. But if we go back to Houdini once more, I'm just going to go and modify that input curve like so, and move a couple of points on it. Okay, I'm going to hit save to disk. And we go back to Unreal once more. I'll just go and do that again just to make sure I actually did it. And then we're going to click recook. You see it removes the previous result and creates the new result. So that's exactly what we're looking for. That's great. The only issue is if we want to check to see if this is kind of going to work in between sort of sessions running the tool, right? So we hit complete. We can see that indeed we have our Houdini asset actor back in the scene now. But what happens if we run the tool? We go up and we click on the splines tool. We hook the landscape splines back up again. And I'm just going to go and make sure we can see a difference. So I'm just going to modify that spline once more. Okay, save to disk. And now let's see what happens if we hit recook. Okay, well, it visually has now created the duplication effect again. And if we look in the outliner up here, we can see we now get 2 of these digital assets in the scene. And this might seem okay, except for the fact that now there's sort of a little bit of confusion over what's really going on, right? If you remember, inside of Houdini, we only have a single curve that's been defined. So now we've ended up with 2 curves again, even though our input has been modified. Okay, so really what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to, as before, we're just trying to modify the previous curve that's come into the system. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to basically keep track of the previous state of the tool so that instead of spawning a new digital asset like this, it's going to try to update the old one. So let's have a little look at how we can do that. We can go ahead and delete both of those BGOs. And you may see that sometimes they sort of end up disconnected like this. And if that happens to you, then remember you can always go back to the landscape editing mode, go to splines and select control points and delete all. Aha. Now, if this happens, and this has happened to me a couple of times, then we're in a little bit of a pickle. I don't know why it does this sometimes. In fact, found the only way to deal with this is then to go inside of the sort of select the chunks one by one like this, which is really a pain. So I'm going to go and kind of close that level. I'm going to reopen up that level again now that we found ourselves in this kind of broken state. And I'm going to see if I can go ahead and clear them up again now. So select control points and delete. Okay, yeah, so sometimes, I don't know if that's a bug of Houdini or Unreal, but you can actually end up in a situation where the splines won't be deleted. So I'm not sure what's causing that. I'll make an RFE for Houdini. Hopefully that will just get sorted out. Okay, so let's try to remember where we were before we get too off track. We just said that we are going to modify the tool. So we're basically going to change it so that when we recook it, so we run it once, and then if we were to exit the tool and rerun the tool, so we're going to go ahead, closed it, reopened it, and hit rerun. There we go. We're going to change it so that instead of creating a new digital asset, it's actually going to sort of remember the state it was in when we last left the tool. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit complete, and then I'm going to delete those two digital assets in the scene. Okay, now that we have a clean scene, I'm just going to save again. All right, and don't worry too much about these deformations that have been left in the terrain. We can actually just go into the landscape editing mode and you see that those get cleared up. It's just a question of when the terrain gets refreshed. So you can always just refresh that quite easily there. Okay, remember these tools are all quite experimental and new, so you're bound to run into some weird stuff. Okay, so in order to basically save the state of the tool, what I want to do is when I create the digital asset and the wrapper here, I basically want to store that asset into the property set. So if you remember, we have our property set here, which can hold information. And what we can do with the scriptable tools framework with the property set is we can grab that property set inside of the tool. So I'm going to say get the property set, and then on the shutdown event, we can do a save property set settings. Okay. So this just means that when we create the tool, it's going to save those settings to the property set. So the next thing we can do is on the startup, when we attach that property set to the tool, we can go ahead and restore the property set settings. Okay. Now you can see that there's a save key here on both the save and the restore. So this allows you to sort of have lots of presets and different settings that you might want to save. In this case, we're only interested in retrieving the final state that the tool was left in. Okay. So this has two benefits. The first one is it's going to stop us from having to constantly keep hooking up that BGO file because it's going to remember the last one we set. And then the second thing it's going to do is if we go back to the property set and we create a new variable, and we make sure that we're getting a variable of type Houdini asset actor, because that's the asset that's been created after instantiation. I'm going to call this Houdini actor. Here we go. Okay, so now if we go back again on the spline tool, we can see that we have that Houdini actor there. Basically, once these two variables get filled out, which we're going to do in the tool, then we can save those references, and then the next time we run the tool, we can just do a little check and sort of find the Houdini asset actor that we were previously working with to continue working with it. Okay, so back to the tool. We now just need to make sure that we're actually setting the asset actor when it's created. So we're going to go to the instantiation here of the asset, and with a reference to the HDA wrapper here, we can actually get the asset actor like so. It may make sense actually again to do this after the post instantiation delegate, just to make sure that it's actually already been created. Okay, like so. We're going to from the wrapper here, we're just going to get the asset actor, and then we're going to set Houdini actor on the property set. Okay, so this means we're just populating that variable like so. Now, if we boot up our tool once more and give it a preliminary run, we can see that we get our first spline on the terrain. And then if we go back to Houdini and save out some new curves onto the terrain, go back to Unreal, so I'll just double check that's saved. Okay, so now if I go ahead and hit recook, we can say we get the intended behavior where it sort of updates the old rather than adding to it. Now, if I just go and modify, in fact, let's just go ahead and delete those curves and draw an entirely new one. There we go, and save this one out. Now, what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to end the tool session and run it once more. And we're going to see that we still get that Houdini BGO import there up in the label, but we're going to see that we still get the issue of duplication here with the Houdini asset actors, even though we only see one output in the scene. So let's go ahead and deal with that now. So I'm popping back into the tool, and although we have populated the property view for the tool, we haven't actually done anything with that information. So what we want to do is we want to grab a reference to that Houdini asset that we've now got. So we've got get the Houdini actor. And right now we're only doing a check to see if the HD wrapper is valid. And this HDA wrapper is only going to return a valid result if we're in the tool session that we created the asset with. So basically, when we exit the tool and restart the tool, again, this variable is going to be null. So it's not going to know anything about the wrapper. This is going to return false. However, the fact that this returns false isn't the full picture because we did have a previous tool session. And that's what this Houdini actor in the scene tells us. So if we go ahead and do an isValid check again on the is not valid. So if we are not in the current tool session, so let's just go ahead and add a new tool session, and we'll go in here and we'll write same tool session. Then what we're going down to see is, was there a previous tool session? So we say if this returns true, then we're saying that was previous tool session or previous session exists. Where if it's not valid, then we can assume that this is the first ever session. Okay, so I'm using the word session to describe when we open the scriptable tools mode. And I'm using all of these little descriptions here to help me understand what these validity checks are actually really doing. Okay, so let's make a bit more space, like so. And so if there was a previous session, because we have an actor in the scene, but there is no valid wrapper that's attached to the actor, then we can just go ahead and let's move this up here, and we can just go ahead and destroy that actor. Okay, nice and simple. Kind of messy little code there though. I don't know, just gonna wire it through for now. So we're going to, in this case, just destroy the actor because there's no wrapper to be destroyed. So we don't need to care about how cleanly we destroy it. Because, okay. Or rather, there is no wrapper to destroy. So it's fine to just destroy the actor. And then if it's the first ever session, we're just going to go ahead and run as usual. Okay. All right. So if you can see, I've also added a little delay here. I'm going to decrease that. Delays are just helpful, I think, as I already mentioned, but because of the way that the Houdini engine works, it sort of does stuff asynchronously. Sometimes it can be good to just put a little bit of offsets between when you're trying to instantiate stuff and delete stuff. And we're pretty good now, but there is actually just one other thing that we need to be aware of, and that's the fact that at no point when we instantiate our assets or run through the sequence of logic, when we shut down the script, we're never actually deleting the wrapper. And there's a possibility that if we close a session and restart it, we lose the reference to the wrapper, but it still exists in the background. So what we need to do is, if we go back down to the on-script shutdown event, we're actually going to go ahead and delete the instantiated asset once more. But we already had this behavior, and all this would do is destroy the asset in the scene, the actor in the scene as well. So we need to do something else in addition to this to ensure that the actor in the scene doesn't get destroyed. What we need to do is say wrap Houdini asset object, and we're just going to leave this field blank. If you mouse over this, you'll see that it says that if we leave the field blank, then it will unwrap the currently wrapped objects. Okay, so by doing this, we're still handling the lifetime kind of healthily of the wrappers and the actors in the scene. Okay, so you'd think that this would be enough to get everything working, right? Well, if we go to the splines mode and we just hit recook once, we get our first spline in the scene. And I'm not particularly interested in the actual path of the spline right now. I'm interested in sort of the lifetime of the Houdini assets and having that all be handled healthily. So if I go ahead and hit complete, we'll see that this remains in the scene. So even though we deleted the wrapper, the actor remains. And if we go ahead and run it again once more and then hit recook, well, we see that it regenerates, but we see that we also get this slightly weird thing where we've now got these two BGOs in the scene. And it took me ages to figure this one out, what's actually going on. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete both of them. And basically what's happening here It seems very strange. I'm not sure it's intended behavior, but basically the way that I've got it set up, when we hit the event to recook, it's an event dispatcher. Okay, so that means that this property set is dispatching an event to every instance of the tool, and every instance of the tool is going to get recooked. And it's very strange, but I'll just show you what's going on. I'll just print hello when I hit recook. All right, so now if I run the tool and open the output log and I hit recook, we can see that it says hello. And if I close it and I rerun it, it's now going to say hello twice. If I close it and I rerun it again, it's now going to say hello 3 times. And from what I can tell, there's an instance of the tool, even after we hit complete, that lives in the background. So this may get patched out because it feels like a bit of a bug. But there's an instance of the tool that lives in the background that's still getting the event sent to it. And I figured out a hacky little workaround to stop this from happening. And that hacky little workaround is just to go down again to event on script shutdown. It's to get a reference to the property set, and it's to unbind all events from dispatch recook. And this is definitely a very hacky way to do it, because I don't think that the pathfinding tool should be living in the background. But this seemed to solve my issue. So if we go back now and run the tool once more and hit recook, I'm going to clear the log. Okay, hit recook, we get it once. If I close the tool, open the tool again and hit recook, we see it's only the most recent instance of the tool that actually fires off the event. So that's how we resolve that issue. If I go back to the recook event now, wire it back in properly, as we've seen, and go back into the viewport, load it up, hit recook. We see we get our spline, close the tool, click recook again, run it again, and we get our spline. We only get 1 instance. And just to be doubly sure, I'm going to go back into Houdini. Oops. I'm going to add in another spline off to the side. There we go. Save this result out to disk. And we're going to load this up once more, and we're going to hit recook once more. And we see that we get exactly the behavior that we want, with the tool being able to sort of pick up where it left off, even if you close and restart the tool. Okay, so we've handled the state, so sort of restoring the previous state of the tool and then using that to sort of update the curves on the terrain rather than continually adding to them. And now we're going to sort of start looking at how can we start drawing out these waypoints directly inside of Unreal and getting that sort of nice user experience built up around the HDA. So that's what we'll be looking at next.